Welcome to the Reality Revolution. I am your host, Brian Scott. What a glorious day we have today. We're going to talk about a fascinating subject. Is it a play or is it a game? This is very similar to the discussion of free will versus predestination. I cover a lot of territory on my podcast, and I have discovered that there is somewhat of a paradox from some of my teachings, and as we learned from Quo, within the paradox, we can learn great lessons. In an interesting interview I recently had with Nick Say, he discussed his concept of our reality as a game. And I really like this way of viewing our reality. Yet at the same time, there's a discussion in much of what I read that Neville Goddard describes it as a play, saying, you were shown the whole thing like a play. Go into the stage tonight and someone moves across the stage and they play the perfect play of God's only salvation. The only way that man could be saved, he walks across the stage and he plays it. You go to a play tonight and somebody is shot, you know he goes home tonight after being shot and he has the most wonderful time. Their day begins at night, for they work at night. So they go home and the actor goes home and that's night, his day begins. He emphasizes in many of his lectures that we play many parts. You play every part according to Neville Goddard. In another lecture, he envisions that what's happening when you live your life, you're putting your own role on it. So he gives the example, if somebody goes to Hamlet, a new actor is playing the role of Hamlet, he can totally interpret that role differently. He can emphasize different words, different sentences, and it can be interpreted quite differently, but still it has the same script. And everybody is following this script. And he often uses this metaphor in describing the director. If the director of the play has you playing the role of the thief and you don't do a very good job of it, well, the director might be somewhat angry because you didn't play the role of the thief properly. So every one of us is playing a role in a grand play. Neville Goddard even emphasizes that we move from this play to yet another play. And there is some hint in his concept of the afterlife that what's happening is when you go into another reality and you relive a life, you're actually going into someone else's life or something similar to that, and you're just playing the role of that one more time. So imagine that God knows everything that's going to happen in the future, and everything is predestined. And he would like to plug you in as Thomas Jefferson so you can learn about government and politics. Or he can plug you in as a doctor. This has already been played in our reality, but you plug your role in and you play it out. You may have different things happen. This is a fascinating concept. In another lecture, God plays all the parts. Neville says, what author would condemn the actors for playing the parts beautifully that he conceived? Would he rave about the thief if he conceived the thief, if he played it well? He'd bawl him out if he didn't. If the thief came off that stage without getting the sneer and the hate of the people, then he didn't play the part well. And the author is disgusted with the actor and would fire him. I would play it my way. You're not telling the part as I conceived it. Therefore, when the audience hisses the one on the stage, who should they hiss? He's unseen, the author. He's in the wings, can't see him, yet he's written the whole thing. So you go and replace the actors. They're all puppets wearing masks. And you want to blame something, you call that author out, and he's always unseen. Well, God is unseen, and he's playing all the parts in the world. There's nothing but God, according to Neville Goddard. In yet another lecture, The Wearer of the Mask, Neville says, we all put on masks and we're all playing the play, playing anything, playing the weak man, the strong man, the rich man, the poor man. And we play it all by imagination. For it was in the beginning conceived by imagination, and then imagination is playing it all. For you are all imagination, and God is all imagination. That's all it is. This whole vast universe is nothing more than imagination ceaselessly creating. That's what it is. This gets to the idea of predestination, which has been discussed in many biblical circles. In the Bible, we find Pauline passages which appear to teach predestination. In Romans 9, Paul wrote that God said to Moses, "I will have mercy on who I will." In other words, the only thing that counts is the mercy of God, not what human beings want to or try to do. When God wants to show mercy, he does, and when he wants to harden someone's heart, he does. Also in Ephesians 1, Paul wrote, "He has let us know the mystery of his purpose, the hidden plan, so kindly he made Christ from the beginning. We were claimed as God's own, chosen from the beginning under the predetermined plan of the one who guides all things as he decides by his own will." The scriptures add insight into this question, and additional people and events reveal the historical steps. Bishop Augustine taught predestination. He contended that we are free to do whatever we desire, but we are not free to determine our desires. Because of original sin, our desires come from our sinful natures. Luther acknowledged that we have freedom over everyday things such as to choose chicken or beef, but our eternal life is in the hands of God. We are saved by faith, but faith is the gift of God to whomever he wills. Luther said he wished the term free will had never been invented. It is not found in Scripture and is properly applied only to God. When asked how to begin to be godly, he replied that there is no beginning except when Christ enters, because everything we begins and ends in sin. So a lot of this discussion of predestination is talking about that we're already sinful. Everything is locked in. My least favorite interpretation is what is called supralapsarianism, which claims because of the original sin and the fall of man that God predestined some to salvation and others to damnation. Can you imagine a God that would choose at your birth in the universe billions of years ago that you're going to be damned? There's also infralapsarianism, which claims that it was after the fall that God, from the masses of humankind, who all deserve to be reprobated, graciously elected some to salvation, leaving the others to their sin, which is referred to as single predestination. I don't want to get into the little details of it, but it's clearly been an argument that has been made in spiritual circles that the Bible says we're predestined. Interestingly, Nietzsche, the philosopher and scholar, castigated both Paul and Calvin for teaching predestination. He felt it impugned the justice of God. In The Wanderer and His Shadow, he wrote, "What cruel and insatiable vanity must have flowed in the soul of men who thought this up first or second." If you do not understand the Bible in the way that Neville describes it, then it becomes true that there are biblical passages which appear to support predestination, but most Christians seem to believe they are able to make free choices. In the Law of One material, free will is emphasized as a key component of our third density experience. This free will emphasizes our ability to make choices. In the Law of One framework, they describe the earth as sort of a game. In fact, in one of the earlier channelings in 1974, before the raw material came out, we are given this quote, "You have chosen to be participants in a game within an illusion that is bounded by a narrow layer upon the surface of a small planet." So we get an idea that they're describing it more as a game. They describe that we're in this life and we have free will and we have a choice. We're choosing whether to be of service to self or service to others. And there's a gaming element to this. If we reach 51% of our behavior and thought and action to be service to others, then we move up to the next level of the game, which is fourth density positive, by reincarnating on another planet or the same one in a different environment. Then we continue to learn new lessons playing a new game. Yet if we reach 95% service to ourself, we move to fourth density negative. So in the construction of the Law of One, it does seem to appear that they're talking about it as a game. And so the key question I wanted to ask is, do we believe the Neville Goddard that everything's a play, or do we believe that it's a game, or is there somewhere in between? Neville Goddard was emphasizing that we're playing roles and states, and these states are sort of like characters in a play. And when we enter into that state, we enter into the script of it. And so we have the choice to enter into different states. I tend to look at it as we may be caught in a certain role, but we can choose a different one. We can choose a different state. And by doing it, then our script changes. One of the most interesting aspects of this, I go to Vadim Zeland's book, Tufty the Priestess, and the concept of the Eternity Archive. The idea is, it is like a play, but more like a movie. You have a movie running in your reality right now, and it is set. There is a script that plays out everything that's happening. But you have the choice of loading up a different script. Each of these scripts are perfectly laid out. So if you enter into the script of Michael Jordan, you end up becoming a basketball player for the Chicago Bulls, right? That is written out as a script. There are scripts for your life that are laid out, and there are an infinite number of scripts that are in what he calls the alternative space. You are simply loading up a script when you can use your plat or different meditation techniques. When you choose to assume a different reality, you're loading up a new script. But then you follow that script, it moves along. We do, obviously, at least to our conscious selves, appear to have free will. I can choose to turn off this podcast at any time. I can eat whatever I want. I can do whatever I want. There is nothing that's stopping me from this freedom that I have. But on a more subtle level, everything is playing out as a script. If you look at the cause and effect and the different things that come up, oftentimes it appears that it's not random. How many times have you been reading the social media and people are commenting on some weird event that's happened in politics or in the news, and they're like, clearly this is a simulation. The simulation theory tends to encourage the idea of the game. So I would recommend that you read 3 amazing books by Thomas Campbell. Thomas Campbell wrote My Big Toe, and it's a sort of trilogy where he is using his understanding of programming and software and physics and describing the universe very much like a simulation. And it has the elements of a simulation. Obviously, holographic theory shows that what appears as reality is holographic. But we have all played, or most of us have played, expansive world games such as Grand Theft Auto, where you can drive around, there's a map, you can walk into any house, and you have freedom within this game, but you're still stuck in the programming of this game. So you can drive whatever cars are available, you can enter into any house that's available, but whatever you do, there are certain rules that structure what will happen if you pull out a gun. And if you watch the game, when you enter into areas that others haven't gone to, the simulation seems to build itself around those areas that you go to. We have lots of experiences all the time that seemingly appear to show that we're in a simulation. I've seen a bird freeze in the air. You've seen the videos of somebody feeding a chipmunk and it's just frozen. Sometimes it appears that there's a glitch in the software. If we take the game theory, then we can understand as you move through the planet, if you move to an area where there have been no human beings, then the simulation can start to create itself. Then once you move into that area again, somebody else has already been there, that area of the simulation is locked in. But if you move into some forested area where no human being has been, then the simulation starts to create itself around certain rules. So we have a choice of looking at the world like a play, and all the parts are going and everything's going to happen, or it's a game. I want to choose the structure of the game. Now, either way, if we look at it at the play, there's going to be bit roles that are insignificant, small parts that people will play. And if it's a game, then you get what are non-player characters, or what Dolores Cannon calls the background people, where she described it through her channelings as some people appear as energy to fill in the simulation. So there are people that most of us never meet that are not really people. They're just there to add to the simulation, to create catalyst for your journey as you move along. I certainly feel like I've met people that are background people. I had an episode on the background people that I had to remove, but it's very interesting. And maybe I'm a background person. There's another aspect to this. Many of us are subconsciously programmed. And so many of us, while conscious on some level, are following a program, and we are seemingly like background people or non-player characters. There are people that you encounter when you're playing a video game that are not playing the game. They're obviously following certain programs. A really fun exploration of this is in the movie The Free Guy with Ryan Reynolds, where he realizes that he is inside a computer simulation and he is a program as he goes to work every day at his bank. For many of us, that's what's happening. We're awakening in a game where we've been following certain programs. And when we awaken in the game, we realize that we have a tangible effect on the game and we can change the way the game is played out. So what happens when people discuss reality creation is it's moving to a different level where we can change the programming and the events and scenarios that are programmed into the game. What is your opinion of this? I want to know your opinion. There's definitely room for discussion, but it feels like we're in an educative game that is teaching us lessons, and we're moving through levels so we can earn or gain the points that move us to different levels. By serving others up to a certain point, we can move to a more expansive and different sort of game. Or if we choose to just serve ourselves, we're moved to a different portion of the game. And we're learning the rules of the game as we play along. But there are certain players that can reach a point where they can change the scenarios and programs in the game by accessing the deeper level of programming, and they can reprogram themselves. So there's a couple of cool concepts that we can get. We can either look at this as this archive of scripts that we follow, that we're loading into our reality and we follow that script, or we can follow the program. But in either case, by using both of these models, there is an understanding that we enter into certain portions of what Quo calls this illusion, and there is a script, or there is a programmed scenario that will occur. And what is happening is we're learning to change the programming. So if you're creating a reality, you're setting up a new program. And what often happens then is you got to follow the script. Things will come up that guide you along as you follow the script. And I meet people that will start to create the program, but they will not follow the script that is laid out for them, or they will not follow the new program that is created as they change the program. It is a comprehensive game that allows you to reprogram elements of it. But I do believe we have free choice. And when we talk about the play aspect of it, that takes away some of our choice aspects from it. Now, that's not what I want. If it's true, that's fine. If I'm playing a role as an actor, I'll do my best to play this role. But I appreciate free will to the point that I don't want this to be a play. I want this to be a game. And there are multiple different possibilities, and there are multiple different scripts that are laid out before me, and I still have a choice. I don't believe that God has already laid out everything that's going to happen for us, and we have no control over that. What sort of a cruel God would set it up so that you're going to be damned? That you are set up in a script that you will be damned, because that is what many people are interpreting the Bible as. This idea that we're predestined, or only a small number of people are predestined to be saved by God and the rest are to be damned, what sort of a cruel deity would create a game in which conscious beings would be damned on purpose and there's no way for them to escape? Obviously, we face some programming when we're born into a reality, the programming of the environment that we're in, and more importantly, our genetic programming. Our genetics are programmed. It programs the color of our skin, our health, our height, our body structure. Those are part of the script and the program and the predestiny that we have to embrace at the beginning of the game. Those are the rules of the game. Just like choosing your avatar when you choose a game that you want to play. Those are the limitations that you create for yourself, whatever character that you choose to play. But my emphasis and my understanding in the way that I've interacted in this game is that there are infinite possibilities available. There's not a deadlocked script that everybody is following into. There's no way for me to prove this. There's no way for me to prove to you that there are infinite possibilities, and I would love to get your interpretation of it. When you choose to take a left or a right, what is happening with the flow of reality? If you choose that left, you enter into another reality, and this other reality is different than the one if you took a right. It's a program. And perhaps it is a play that's scripted out, but it is coming from a choice that you made. And within the play, every single choice that you make will lead to a sequence of events. This feels like a script because there are scripts that are used in games, but it is not predestined. You still have the power of choice, and you can choose to take the left or the right. That is the beauty of this system. It is a game, and there are winners, and perhaps there are losers. But let's look at games in general. Almost all of us are biased against games today, even gamers. We can't help it. This bias is part of our culture, part of our language, and it's even woven into the way we use the words game and player in everyday conversation. Consider the popular expression, gaming the system. If I say that you're gaming the system, what I mean is that you're exploiting it for your own personal gain. Sure, you're technically following the rules, but you're playing in ways you're not meant to play. Generally speaking, we don't admire this kind of behavior, yet paradoxically, we often give people this advice. You better start playing the game. What we mean is just do whatever it takes to get ahead. When we talk about playing the game in this way, we're really talking about potentially abandoning our own morals and ethics in favor of someone else's rules. Meanwhile, we frequently use the term player to describe someone who manipulates others to get what they want. We don't really trust players. We have to be on our guard around people who play games, and that's why we might warn someone, don't play games with me. We don't like to feel like someone is using strategy against us or manipulating us from their personal amusement. We don't like to be played with. And when we say, this isn't a game, what we mean is that someone is behaving recklessly or not taking a situation seriously. This admonition implies that games encourage and train people to act in ways that are not appropriate for real life. When you start to pay attention, you realize how collectively suspicious we are of games. Just by looking at the language we use, you can see we're wary of how games encourage us to act and how we're liable to become if we play them. But these are metaphors, and they don't accurately reflect what it really means to play a well-designed game. They're just a reflection of our worst fears about games, and it turns out that we're really afraid of isn't games, we're afraid of losing track of where the game ends and where reality begins, which makes this particular game of reality so amazing. If you're going to fix reality with games, we have to overcome this fear. We need to focus on how real games actually work and how we act and interact when we're playing the same game together. Can we look at games today to understand the game of life? Games today come in many forms, platforms, and genres than at any other time in human history. We have single-player, multiplayer, massively multiplayer games. We have games you can play on your personal computer, your console, your handheld device, your mobile phone. not to mention games we still play on fields or on courts, with cards or on boards. We can choose from among 5-second mini games, 10-minute casual games, 8-hour action games, and role-playing games that go on endlessly, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. We can play story-based games and games with no story. We can play games with and without scores. We can play games that challenge mostly our brains and mostly our bodies, and infinitely various combinations of the two. And yet somehow, even with all these varieties, when we're playing a game, we just know it. There's something essentially unique about the way games structure experience. When you strip away the genre differences and the technological complexities, all games share 4 defining traits: a goal, rules, a feedback system, and voluntary participation. The goal is the specific outcome that players will work to achieve. It focuses their attention and continually orients their participation throughout the game. The goal provides players with a sense of purpose. The rules place limitations on how players can achieve the goal. By removing or limiting the obvious ways of getting to the goal, the rules push players to explore previously uncharted possibility spaces. They unleash creativity and foster strategic thinking. The feedback system tells players how close they are to achieving the goal. It can take the form of points, levels, a score, or a progress bar. Or in most basic forms, the feedback system can be as simple as the player's knowledge of an objective outcome. The game is over when. Real-time feedback serves as a promise to the players that the goal is definitely achievable, and it provides motivation to keep playing. Finally, voluntary participation requires that everyone who is playing the game knowingly and willingly accepts the goal, the rules, and the feedback. Knowingness establishes common ground for multiple people to play together. And the freedom to enter or leave a game at will ensures that intentionally stressful and challenging work is experienced as safe and pleasurable activity. This definition may surprise you for what it lacks: interactivity, graphics, narrative, rewards, competition, virtual environments, or the idea of winning. All traits we often think of when it comes to games today. True, these are common features of many games, but they are not defining features. What defines a game are the goal, the rules, the feedback system, and voluntary participation. Everything else is an effort to reinforce and enhance these 4 core elements. A compelling story makes the goal more enticing. A complex scoring metric makes the feedback systems more motivating. Achievements and levels multiply the opportunities for experiencing success. Multiplayer and massively multiplayer experiences can make the prolonged play more unpredictable or more pleasurable. Immersive graphics and sounds and 3D environments increase our ability to pay sustained attention to the work we're doing in the game. Can you imagine a game of this level, so vivid and so real, that is by the second, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for hundreds of years at a time? Perhaps in another level of density, when we come out of the game, it's just a few minutes for us, but we experience the 100 years in real time. But when we move out of it, it's all in a short burst. Bernard Suits, the late great philosopher, sums it up in what I consider the most convincing and useful definition of a game. Playing a game is the voluntary attempt to overcome unnecessary obstacles. We don't have to play this game. We chose to come into this game to play it, to overcome obstacles we don't necessarily have to overcome, but help us in many ways. That definition in a nutshell explains everything that is motivating and rewarding and fun about playing games. And it brings us to our first fix for reality: unnecessary obstacles. Compared with games, reality is too easy. Games challenge us with voluntary obstacles and help us put our personal strength to better use. Games that we actually play as compared to the game of life. To see how these 4 traits are essential to every game, let's put them to quick test. Can these 4 criteria effectively describe what's so compelling about games such as golf or Scrabble or Tetris? Let's look at golf. As a golfer, you have a clear goal: to get a ball in a series of small holes with fewer tries than anyone else. If you weren't playing a game, you'd achieve this goal the most efficient way possible. You'd walk right up to each hole and drop the ball in with your hand. What makes golf a game is that you're willingly agreeing to stand really far away from each hole and swing at the ball with a club. Golf is engaging exactly because you, along with all the other players, have agreed to make the work more challenging than it has any reasonable right to be. We are infinitely powerful gods that have chosen to limit our power to its lowest limit while existing temporarily in these bodies. And so you may think, gosh, these challenges are ridiculous, but we chose these challenges, much like we choose to play a game of golf. Add to that the challenge, a reliable feedback system. You have both objective measurement of whether or not the ball makes it into the hole, plus the tally of how many strokes you've made. And you have a system that not only allows you to know when and if you have achieved the goal, but it also holds out the hope of potentially achieving the goal in increasingly satisfying ways in fewer strokes or against more players, which makes it so that you want to play the game again, even with those limitations. Golf is, in fact, Bernard Suit's favorite quintessential example of a game. It really is an elegant explanation for how and why we get so thoroughly engaged when we play. Well, what about a game where the unnecessary obstacles are more subtle? In Scrabble, your goal is to spell out long and interesting words with lettered tiles. You have a lot of freedom. You can spell any word found in the dictionary. In normal life, we have a name for this. It's called typing. Scrabble turns typing into a game by restricting your freedom in several important ways. To start, you have only 7 letters to work with at a time. You don't get to choose which keys or letters you can use. You also have to base your words on the words that other players have already created. And there's a finite number of times each letter can be used. Without these arbitrary limitations, I think we can all agree that spelling words with lettered tiles wouldn't be much of a game. Freedom to work in the most logical and efficient way possible is the very opposite of gameplay. But add a set of obstacles and a feedback system that shows you exactly how well you're spelling long and complicated words in the face of these obstacles. You get a system of completely unnecessary work that has enthralled more than hundreds of millions of people in many, many countries over the last 70 years. Golf and Scrabble have a clear win condition, but the ability to win is not a necessary defining trait of games. Tetris, often dubbed the greatest computer game, is a perfect example of a game you cannot win. When you play a traditional 2D game of Tetris, your goal is to stack falling puzzle pieces, leaving as few gaps as possible in between them. The pieces fall faster and faster, and the game simply gets harder and harder. It never ends, and still it simply waits for you to fail. If you play Tetris, you are guaranteed to lose. But you still play it. You enjoy playing it, and as it gets harder, you see how far you can get. There's an aspect to our reality that is very much the same. As it gets harder and harder, you see how far you can get, how long you can live, how much you can do, how much service you can offer. But if you look at the best games, in a good computer game or video game, you're always playing on the very edge of your skill level, always on the brink of falling off. When you do fall off, you feel the urge to climb back on. That's because this is virtually nothing as engaging as this state of working at the very limits of your ability, or what both game designers and psychologists call flow. When you are in a state of flow, you want to stay there. Both quitting and winning are equally unsatisfying outcomes. The popularity of unwinnable games like Tetris completely upends the stereotype that gamers are highly competitive people who care more about winning than anything else. Competition and winning are not defining traits of games, nor are they defining interests of the people who love to play them. The philosopher James P. Carse once wrote that there are 2 kinds of games: finite games, which we play to win, and infinite games, which we play in order to keep playing as long as possible. In the world of computer and video games, Tetris is an example of infinite game. We play Tetris for the purpose of simply continuing to play a good game. Another side note is that games make us happy because they're hard work that we choose for ourselves, and it turns out that almost nothing makes us happier than good hard work, especially in the structure of a game. We don't normally think of games as hard work. After all, we play games. And we've been taught to think of play as the very opposite of work. But nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, As Brian Sutton Smith, a leading psychologist of play, once said, the opposite of play isn't work, it's depression. So if you view life as if you're playing a game, it will change your emotional mindset for the world around you. When we're depressed, according to clinical definition, we suffer from a pessimistic sense of inadequacy and a despondent lack of activity. If we were to reverse these traits, we get something like this: an optimistic sense of our own capabilities and an invigorating rush of activity. There's no clinical psychological term that describes this positive condition, but it's a perfect description of the emotional state of gameplay. The truth is, we can play any games we want, and we can create any future we can imagine. In this simulation, as I understand it, our ability to create reality is a part of the game. This is a part of the game, our locus of control for the programming. We can learn to reprogram our subconscious programming, which is changing our character, and we can take actions that change the exterior reality that we exist in, which is part of the game. That's my belief, that we're learning to change the world around us, and that is part of the game. So I would love to know what you feel. Are we predestined? Are we in a single script that never changes and there's nothing else? Or do we have free will? Do we have free will up to a point? Is this a game, or is this a play that we're just playing out the script? I try to argue here that we're playing a game, and that's the purpose of what we're doing. We have limitations built into this game on purpose because it makes it fun, and we're learning how to play. And in the process of learning how to play, we get to play an even more advanced game. Yes, it's play, but at the same time, this game that the Creator has given us is helping us to move towards the Creator. And I like to look at it as a game. And if you have limitations in your life, you have a handicap, learning disability, you live in a terrible area, whatever the limitations are, consider for a moment that you chose those limitations as a part of the game. And if you can overcome those limitations, you get greater points, and you get to move to a more interesting simulation afterwards. I just have two more words, and that is, let's play. You can find all episodes of The Reality Revolution at therealityrevolution.com. And welcome to The Reality Revolution.